General Leo sat in the deep underground war room beneath the city of Seoul, surrounded by hundreds of glowing screens that showed every human colony that was now under threat. The urgent message from Captain Kim Hanna had reached Earth exactly 6 hours ago, and in those 6 short hours everything had changed completely. The room buzzed with activity as military officers rushed back and forth carrying reports and giving orders. The peaceful Earth that had focused on exploration and science for 40 years was transforming into something the galaxy had never seen before. Status report. Lee commanded in his deep voice that had once ordered soldiers into battle during the old Border Wars. Commander Yang Su stepped forward holding a tablet full of information. Sir, all diplomatic missions have been called back to Earth immediately. The Vorth are moving their fleets towards 7 of our colonies at the same time. They think they can capture our settlements before we can do anything to stop them. Lee nodded grimly as he studied the tactical displays showing red enemy ships moving toward blue human colonies. For 4 decades, humanity had focused on building schools and hospitals and research stations. They had established beautiful cities among the stars and created a network of peaceful colonies that traded with each other. Military spending had been very low because most resources went to education and healthcare and building better lives for everyone. The galaxy had seen this as weakness, but they had made a terrible mistake. What about the reserves? Lee asked. Yang Su smiled for the first time in many hours. Sir, every retired military officer and every former soldier and every person who ever served in any capacity is volunteering to fight. The recruitment centers cannot handle the massive crowds. We have people standing in lines for entire city blocks, and the industrial conversion faster than anyone predicted. Sir, the same factories that made hospital equipment yesterday are producing weapons today. The shipyards that built exploration vessels are now rolling out warships 24 hours a day. It is like our entire species has been waiting for this moment. Lee walked to the enormous display showing the entire galaxy. Human colonies appeared as bright blue dots while red marks showed the approaching Vorth fleets. The aliens had spent months studying human peaceful behavior, but they had never bothered to learn about human history. They studied our desire for peace, but never learned about the wars we fought to become peaceful. They do not know about the strength we chose to put away. They do not know what happens when you wake up something that was sleeping. An aide approached, carrying an urgent message. General Sir, the first battle group is ready for deployment. Admiral Choi Min is requesting permission to engage the enemy. Lee looked at the tactical display one more time. The Vorth commanders expected to find easy victories against soft civilian targets. Instead, they were about to encounter something they had never seen before: humans who had been pushed too far. Tell Admiral Choi that the gloves are off. Lee said quietly. Show the Vorth what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out in every major city. Retired soldiers were putting on uniforms they had not worn in decades. Factory workers were learning to build weapons instead of peaceful tools. Scientists were designing new ways to defend their colonies. In the orbital shipyards above Earth, massive construction ships that had been building exploration vessels were being converted to produce warships. The same engineers who had designed ships to explore distant stars were now creating vessels designed to protect them. Dr. Kim Yeon stood in her laboratory looking at the medical research she had been conducting for the past 5 years. She had been working on ways to help sick people heal faster, but now she was being asked to help soldiers fight better. She felt sad about leaving her peaceful work, but she understood that sometimes you had to fight to protect the things you loved. Her research into human biology could help create better armor and medical treatments for wounded soldiers. The transformation was happening everywhere. Construction workers were building military bases. Teachers were training new soldiers. Engineers were designing better weapons. Even children were learning how to help in the war effort. But the most important change was happening in the hearts and minds of ordinary people. The Vorth had threatened their families and their way of life. They had rejected every offer of peace and chosen violence. Instead, now humanity was choosing something different. They were choosing to fight back. General Lee received reports from around the world and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. He was proud of how quickly his people were responding to the threat, but sad that it had come to this. The Vorth Empire had made a calculation that humans were too soft to fight back effectively. They had assumed that a species that built hospitals would be helpless against a species that built weapons. They were about to learn that the most dangerous enemy is not the one who loves to fight, but the one who fights to protect what they love. Admiral Choi Min stood on the bridge of the powerful battleship Fury's Edge, watching the Vorth fleet approach the mining colony of New Bizan. The alien ships moved in perfect formation like metal sharks swimming through the darkness of space. The Vorth had expected to find a defenseless mining settlement with maybe a few security guards and some basic defensive systems. Instead, they found a fully armed human battle group waiting for them with weapons charged and ready. Enemy fleet detected in weapons range, reported Lieutenant Oh-hai from her position at the sensor station. 47 vessels, sir, mostly destroyers and cruisers. They are moving in standard attack formation. Choi Min had fought in the border wars 20 years ago, when humans had fought other humans over territory and resources. But this was completely different. This was not about land or money or political power. This was about survival and the right to exist peacefully among the stars. The mining colony below them was home to 50,000 people who had come to this distant world to build better lives. They had families and children and dreams that did not include being conquered by aliens, who saw kindness as weakness. Open a communication channel. To the Vorth commander he ordered. The alien appeared on the main screen, his forearms spread wide in the gesture that meant he was in charge and expected everyone to obey. His 4 red eyes glowed in the dim light of his command ship, and his voice was full of confidence and arrogant. Surrender immediately, human, and we will make your deaths quick and painless. Your tiny fleet cannot hope to stand against the might of the Vorth Empire. Choi Min looked at the alien commander and felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He thought about all the peaceful years when humans had tried to make friends with species like this. He thought about all the rejected offers of friendship and cooperation. I have a different offer for you, he replied calmly. Turn your ships around and go home. This is your only warning. The Vorth commander made the grinding sound that was their version of laughter. You face the assembled might of the Empire with a handful of ships you cannot hope to. His words were suddenly cut off as the first human torpedoes struck his flagship. The Vorth had been expecting the slow, careful tactics they had observed during human exploration missions. Instead, they faced the lightning-fast assault patterns that humans had developed. During centuries of warfare, all ships engaged. Choi Min commanded. The battle was brief and absolutely brutal. Human ships moved with deadly precision that came from years of training and desperate determination. They had studied every type of alien vessel and analyzed every possible weakness and prepared for exactly this moment. The Vorth fought bravely, but they were facing an enemy they did not understand. They had expected humans to fight like other peaceful species with defensive tactics and careful movements. Instead, they faced an all-out attack that seemed to come from everywhere. At once, human fighters swarmed around the larger Vorth ships like angry bees attacking intruders in their hive. The alien pilots were skilled, but they had been trained to fight conventional battles against other warrior races. They had no experience against humans who fought like they had nothing left to lose, because in a way they did not. The Vorth had made it clear that surrender meant slavery or death, so the humans fought with the desperate fury of people protecting their families. Within 1 hour, the alien fleet was completely scattered. Those ships that could still fly were retreating as fast as possible. The rest were nothing but floating debris and emergency pods drifting in. Space casualties, Lieutenant Choi Min asked. Minimal, sir, Oh-hai reported. The Vorth never adapted to our tactics. They kept trying to use their standard battle formations even when it was clear they were not working. Choi Min nodded grimly. The aliens had made another crucial mistake. They had assumed that because humans preferred peace, they must be inexperienced at war. They had forgotten that peaceful species do not survive in a hostile universe unless they know how to fight. When fighting becomes necessary, send a message to all the other colonies, he ordered. Tell them the Vorth can be beaten. Tell them that humanity remembers how to bite back when someone tries to hurt us. The message went out across human space, carried by the fastest communication systems available. Every colony and every ship and every person learned that the first battle had been won, but more importantly, they learned that humans had not forgotten how to fight. They had just chosen not to fight until someone gave them no other choice. The Vorth Empire was about to learn that there is a big difference between choosing peace and being unable to fight, and they were about to discover which one described humanity. Captain Song-A guided her small fighter through the dangerous asteroid field, leading a squadron of volunteers from the research station on Titan. 3 days ago, she had been studying the formation of distant stars and planning peaceful exploration. Missions now, she was hunting Vorth raiders who had attacked civilian transport ships, carrying families and supplies between human colonies. The aliens had thought that attacking helpless civilians would break human spirit. Instead, it had made them. Angrier than ever, contact detected ahead, reported her wingman pilot Nam Ho from his fighter flying beside hers. Looks like a Vorth patrol ship with 2 escorts. Song-A smiled grimly as she checked her weapon systems. The aliens had learned to fear large human battle fleets, but they still thought small groups of humans were easy targets. They were about to learn another painful lesson about underestimating humanity. Remember, she told her squadron over the radio channel, they are expecting to fight scientists and miners and peaceful explorers, show them what angry humans can do when someone hurts innocent people. The attack came without any warning. Song-A led her fighters through the asteroids like ghosts moving through a graveyard. Striking from multiple directions at once, the Vorth pilots were skilled and experienced, but they had been trained to fight other conventional military forces. They had no experience against humans who fought like they had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Every pilot in the squadron had lost someone to the Vorth attacks. Every fighter was motivated by personal anger and the desire for justice. 2 more enemy ships down. Nam Ho reported over the radio, the last one is trying to run away. Song-A watched the surviving Vorth ship flee at maximum speed. Let them go, she said. Let them return to their commanders and tell them exactly what they saw here today. Meanwhile, on the surface of the colony called New Seoul, Colonel Bay Jun watched his defense forces prepare for the next wave of enemy attacks. The Vorth had expected to overwhelm human settlements with superior numbers and better technology. Instead, they found that every colony had been turned into a fortress overnight. Farmers had become soldiers overnight. Scientists had become military tacticians. Children had learned to operate defensive weapon systems. Sir, his aide reported, intelligence sources indicate the Vorth are requesting major reinforcements from their home fleet systems. They are asking for 3 times as many ships as they originally planned to use. Bay Jun nodded with satisfaction. Good, let them bring more ships and more soldiers. We are ready for whatever they can throw at us. The colonel looked out at the defensive positions his people had built in just a few days. Ordinary civilians had worked around the clock to create bunkers and weapon emplacements and communication centers. The Vorth had wanted to conquer a peaceful species that would surrender quickly when threatened. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous: humans who were no longer interested in being peaceful. Send word to General Lee, he told his aide. Tell him we are ready to take the fight directly to them. Instead of just defending our homes, the message traveled back to Earth, where military planners were already preparing the next phase of the war. The Vorth had expected a quick victory against helpless victims. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to get stronger and more dangerous with every battle. Human colonies that had been peaceful research stations were now military bases. Human exploration ships were now armed patrol vessels. Human scientists were now weapons designers and tactical experts. The transformation was happening faster than anyone had thought possible. It was as if the entire human species had been waiting for this moment, when they could stop pretending to be harmless and show the galaxy what they were really capable of. The Vorth Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had confused civilization with weakness. They had mistaken mercy for inability to fight. They had thought that a species that chose peace would be unable to choose war. No, they were learning the difference between cannot fight and will not fight. And they were discovering that humans had simply been choosing not to fight until someone gave them no other choice. The tide of war was turning, and the galaxy was about to see what humans could do when they stopped holding back. General Li Dong stood before the largest gathering of military commanders in human history, looking at the most powerful war fleet that humanity had ever assembled. In just 2 months, they had transformed from a peaceful civilization into a military force that would have impressed their warlike ancestors. The Vorth Empire controls 12 star systems, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the massive briefing room. They have enslaved 6 different intelligent species and destroyed countless worlds for resources. They understand only strength and domination and cruelty. He gestured to the tactical display showing the enemy empire. Today we show them a different kind of strength. We show them what happens when you threaten something that peaceful people will die to protect. Admiral Park Yoon raised her hand. What about their main home fleet, Sir? Intelligence reports suggest they have pulled most of their remaining forces back to defend their core systems, Leah replied. They are finally taking us seriously as a real threat instead of just annoying insects. Captain Lim Tae, the youngest fleet commander in the room, spoke up. Sir, our forces are still outnumbered 3-1 in total ship count. The mathematics do not look good for a direct confrontation. Lee smiled and looked around the room at the faces of men and women who had chosen to fight. Captain, let me tell you something important about humans. We have never been the strongest species on any world we have ever lived. He walked to the tactical display and pointed to different star systems. We have never been the fastest or the most heavily armed or the most naturally gifted at warfare, but we have always been the most adaptable and the most determined and the most creative when it comes to pure survival. The plan he outlined was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Instead of massive frontal assaults between huge fleets, human forces would strike simultaneously at multiple targets across the entire Vorth Empire. They would use tactics that the aliens could not counter because such tactics had never been used in galactic warfare before. They would fight like humans had always fought when their survival was threatened. Remember, Lee concluded, they wanted a war instead of accepting peace. We are going to give them exactly what they asked for, but not in the way they expected to. Days later, the counterattack began. Human fleets appeared in 7 different star systems at exactly the same time, striking at Vorth supply lines and communication centers and military installations. The aliens found themselves fighting a war unlike anything in their long history of conquest. Human ships appeared where they were not expected, attacked targets that seemed unimportant, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. On the bridge of the battleship Retribution, Admiral Park Yoon watched Vorth forces scramble to respond to attacks that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They are completely confused, she reported to General Lee over the communication system. They cannot figure out our attack pattern or predict where we will strike next. That is because there is no pattern, Lee replied from his command center. On Earth, we are not following their rules anymore. We are not fighting their kind of war. We are writing our own rules as we go. The human strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to match the Vorth fleet ship for ship, they attacked everything that kept the enemy fleet supplied, and organized communication stations were destroyed so Vorth commanders could not coordinate their forces. Supply depots were captured so enemy ships ran out of fuel and weapons. Repair facilities were bombed so damaged ships could not be fixed within weeks. The mighty Vorth Empire began to crack under the pressure. Their ships were scattered across multiple systems, trying to respond to threats that kept appearing in new places. More importantly, the species that the Vorth had enslaved began to rebel. Human forces had contacted them and offered support for their fight for freedom. The galaxy was seeing something it had never seen before. A peaceful species that had been forced to fight was not just defending itself, but was liberating others who had been oppressed. The Vorth had started a war thinking they would gain easy victories and new slaves. Instead, they found themselves losing everything they had built through centuries of conquest and cruelty. The humans had shown them that real strength was not the ability to conquer and destroy, but the willingness to fight and die to protect others. Overlord Kresh stood in his command center watching his mighty empire crumble like a sandcastle hit by ocean waves. In 6 months, the humans had gone from helpless prey to an unstoppable force that seemed to be everywhere at once. His fleets were scattered across the galaxy chasing human raiders, who struck without warning and disappeared before they could be caught. His colonies were in revolt. Supported by human weapons and advisors, his own commanders were beginning to question his leadership. The species he had enslaved for decades were now fighting for their freedom with human help. The supply lines that had fed his war machine were cut. The communication networks that had held his empire together were destroyed. My lord, his chief aide reported nervously. The humans are requesting a communication meeting. They say they have terms to discuss. Kresh wanted to refuse, but he was completely out of options. The human war machine had proven to be unlike anything his species had ever encountered. They fought with a combination of tactical brilliance and desperate fury that his forces simply could not match. More importantly, they fought for something his people had never understood. They fought to protect others instead of to conquer them. They fought to free slaves instead of to take more slaves. The main screen flickered and Captain Kim, Hannah, appeared, but she was no longer the peaceful diplomat that Kresh remembered from their first meeting. She now wore the uniform of a military commander, and her eyes held the hardness of someone who had seen too much war. Overlord Kresh, she said calmly, I believe you wanted to discuss surrender terms. Kresh felt his forearms tremble with rage and humiliation. The mighty Vorth Empire does not surrender to inferior species, he growled. Then do not surrender to us, Hannah replied without emotion. Surrender to the 6 species you enslaved who are now fighting alongside us. Surrender to the peaceful colonies you attacked without provocation. Surrender to the children you made orphans and the families you destroyed. She leaned forward and looked directly into his 4 eyes. You wanted to see what humans could do when we were pushed to fight. You have seen it. We took your mighty empire apart in 6 months. We did it while protecting our own people and liberating your slaves and rebuilding what you destroyed. Kresh felt something he had never experienced before in his entire life, pure fear, not fear of death, but fear of becoming completely irrelevant. The humans had proven that strength did not come from conquest or cruelty, but from the willingness to fight for something greater than yourself. What do you want from us? He asked quietly. What we wanted from the very beginning, Hannah said. Peace, real peace built on cooperation between equals, not the silence of the conquered. You can be part of building something better, or you can be remembered as the empire that chose to die rather than learn. She paused and let him think about his options. Your people are not evil, Overlord Kresh, but your system is. You have been taught that strength means taking from others. We are offering to teach you that real strength means giving to others, and if we refuse your terms, Hannah expression did not change, then you will discover that everything you have seen so far was us holding back. You wanted to see humans fight without restraint. Overlord Kresh, pray that you never get that chance. The communication ended, leaving Kresh alone with his thoughts and his dying empire. He had wanted to test human resolve and had instead awakened something that would reshape the entire galaxy. The humans had proven that the greatest strength was not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary and when it was not. The war was over, but something new was beginning. The age of peace enforced by those strong enough to protect it was about to start, and at its heart would be the species that had chosen to build hospitals instead of weapons, right up until the moment they needed to remind the galaxy why that choice had been possible. Humanity had delivered exactly what the Vorth had demanded. They had just discovered they should have been much more careful about what they had wished for. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what the humans had intended all along. Captain Kim, Hannah pressed her face against the cold metal wall of her small room on the diplomatic ship. Peaceful dawn, and felt the weight of 3 years pressing down on her shoulders like heavy stones. She had been trying to make peace with the Vorth Empire for so long that she sometimes forgot what Earth looked like or how her daughter Myra sounded when she laughed. The ship hummed quietly around her as it moved through space toward what might be the last meeting with the aliens. She had learned their harsh language that sounded like breaking glass and metal scraping together. She had studied their culture and discovered they valued strength above all else. She had offered them trade deals that would make both humans and Vorth rich and happy, but every time she thought she was making progress, the Vorth would do something cruel or demand something impossible. They seemed to think that being kind meant being weak. They looked at human hospitals and schools and saw targets instead of achievements. They looked at human art and music and saw waste instead of beauty. Hannah walked to the small window in her room and stared out at the stars. She could see the Vorth fleet in the distance, growing larger every hour like a storm cloud full of lightning and anger. There were so many ships that they blocked out whole sections of space. Their dark hulls gleamed with weapons that could destroy entire cities. She thought about her team on the bridge, Lieutenant Park Jin, who had volunteered for this mission even though he had a new baby at home, Dr. Young. Min, who spoke 7 alien languages and still believed peace was possible. Commander Lee Soo, who had served in the old border wars and knew what real fighting looked like. They all trusted her to find a way to avoid war, but Hannah was beginning to think that war was what the Vorth wanted all along. Maybe they had been using the peace talks as a way to get their ships into position. Maybe they had been lying from the very beginning. The communication system crackled to life and her aide called from the bridge. "Captain Kim, the Vorth commander wants to speak with you. He says this is the final meeting." Hannah took a deep breath and smoothed down her blue diplomatic uniform. She had worn this uniform to hundreds of meetings and negotiations. She had hoped to wear it to a peace signing ceremony, but now she wondered if she would ever get the chance. The bridge was quiet when she entered. Everyone was at their stations, watching the screens that showed the massive alien fleet the Vorth had brought enough ships to destroy every human colony in this sector of space. They were not here to negotiate, they were here to threaten. Lieutenant Park Jin looked up from his console. "Captain, they are demanding we surrender all human colonies beyond the home system. They say we have 30 days to comply." Hannah felt her heart sink like a stone dropped in deep water. She had known this moment would come, but she had hoped for more time. She had hoped for a miracle. She had hoped that somehow the Vorth would see reason and choose cooperation over conquest. The main screen flickered and the face of Overlord Kresh appeared. His 4 arms spread wide in the gesture that meant he was in charge and everyone else should obey. His 4 eyes glowed red in the dim light of his command ship, and his voice rumbled through the speakers like distant thunder. "Human diplomat, your species has been judged and found wanting. You build hospitals when you should build weapons. You teach children when you should train soldiers. You explore space when you should conquer it. You are weak, and the weak deserve to be ruled by the strong." Hannah stepped forward and looked directly at the alien commander. She had practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times. She had imagined what she would say if diplomacy failed. She had hoped she would never need to use these words. "Overlord Kresh, my people have offered you friendship and partnership. We have shown you our art and our music. We have shared our knowledge of science and medicine. We have offered you trade that would benefit both our species. Why do you choose war over peace?" The alien leader made a sound like grinding metal that Hannah had learned was laughter. "Because peace makes you soft human. Your species talks about cooperation while we prepare for domination. You build schools while we build armies. You dream of a better future while we take control of the present." Hannah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest, like ice forming on a winter lake. She thought about her daughter, Mara, who was 8 years old and loved to paint pictures of alien friends she had never met. She thought about the schools and hospitals and libraries that made human colonies beautiful places to live. She thought about the explorers who had died discovering new worlds and the scientists who had spent their lives trying to understand the universe. She thought about all the good things that humans had built while the Vorth had been building weapons and planning wars. "You are right about one thing, Overlord Kresh," Hannah said quietly. "We did choose to build hospitals instead of weapons. We chose to explore instead of conquer. We chose to teach instead to destroy. We chose to create beauty instead of spreading fear." She paused and felt the weight of every person on every human colony who was depending on her to find a way to keep them safe. She felt the weight of every child who deserved to grow up in a peaceful galaxy. But you made one terrible mistake. You assumed that because we wanted peace we could not fight. You assumed that because we chose kindness we were helpless. You assumed that because we preferred to build rather than destroy we had forgotten how to tear things down. The alien commander leaned forward on his screen, his 4 eyes narrowing with interest or perhaps suspicion. "Empty words from a dying race," he growled. "Your threats mean nothing when you face the might of the Empire." Hannah shook her head slowly. "These are not threats, Overlord Kresh. These are facts. Let me tell you something about humans that you never bothered to learn. We have been fighting for survival since before your species discovered fire. We fought ice ages and plagues and wars that lasted generations. We climbed to the top of the food chain on a world that was trying to kill us every single day." She walked closer to the screen so the alien could see her face clearly. "We spent 10,000 years learning how to fight and kill and survive, and then we spent another 1,000 years learning how to stop. We chose to put away our weapons not because we were weak, but because we were strong enough to choose. Peace. The bridge was completely silent. Now everyone was watching and listening as their captain spoke words that would change everything. We built our civilization on the idea that strength means protecting others, not hurting them. We believe that the strongest person is the one who chooses mercy when they could choose revenge. We thought that maybe, just maybe, we could find others in the galaxy who felt the same way. Hannah felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She had to be strong now, stronger than she had ever been in her life. But you have shown us that some species only understand one language. You have shown us that some people only respect force. You have shown us that sometimes the only way to protect peace is to fight for it. She turned to Lieutenant Park Jin, who was watching her with wide eyes. Send a message to Earth. Tell them that Captain Kim Hannah recommends we stop trying to be nice. Tell them the Fourth Empire has chosen war, and now they get to see what humans do when someone threatens our children. The screen went dark as the alien commander cut the connection. The bridge remained silent for a long moment as everyone processed what had just happened. Park Jin cleared his throat. Captain, what do we do now? Hannah looked out at the Vorth fleet that was still growing larger and more threatening. She thought about all the peaceful years that were about to end. She thought about all the violence that was about to begin. Now we go home, Lieutenant. And we remind the galaxy why peaceful species are the ones you should fear the most, because we are the ones who choose when to stop being peaceful. The ship began to turn away from the alien fleet, heading back toward Earth where the real decisions would be made. Hannah stayed on the bridge, watching the stars and thinking about the war that was coming. She had tried so hard to prevent it, but now she would have to help win it. Behind them, the Vorth fleet continued to grow, preparing for what they thought would be an easy conquest. They had no idea what they had just awakened. They had no idea that they were about to face something far more dangerous than any warrior race. They were about to face humans who were no longer interested in being nice.